hanging out in my nursery. And here's the thing. As of 10:30 this morning, I became a licensed Florida nursery. This fall, I'll be opening up. Now, I've got a lot of work to do before I'm ready for anything like that. A lot of work. But I'm going to do it a little at a time. Right now, I've got about 150, maybe 200 plants. By the time I'm ready, which is probably going to be about 6 to 8 weeks from now, I am most likely going to have at least 300 plants, maybe 400. And I'll keep going up from there. But what I'm doing is I'm taking plants that are easy for me to propagate out of my own personal stock. And I'm going to go ahead and propagate those. Right now, I've probably got about a dozen types of plants that are easy for me to propagate and easy for me to sell. So that's what I'll be working on over the next few weeks. So I will be doing live streams from the nursery. Mostly me just sitting out here working on the plants and getting things ready to go. It's also a time for me to be able to kind of take a break from all the vegetable gardening that I've been doing. Now, that doesn't by any chance mean that I'm not going to still be doing something, because I'm always growing something. Right now, I've got okra going, and I've got black-eyed peas going. I was hoping to have maybe a few other things, but that didn't work out exactly the way things are planned. And seldom do things actually work exactly as planned. Hello, Leon. Welcome in. I'm in Florida, United States. So I'll be working in this nursery, getting everything ready, and figuring out exactly how it is that I'm going to expand this situation. Because right now, I'm basically confined to under one tree. It's the best shade I have, and shade is kind of a big deal for me. I'm going to go ahead and keep going and figure out how I can expand. One option is for me to get the old rusted Ford pickup truck out of my yard and put in a shade house, which is a lot of work and probably won't be happening right away. Another option I have actually has to do with the shade houses and having to do along my fence is I can build almost like a lean-to shade house. This is a potential option. When plants get larger than necessary for the nursery area, I can then move them into those areas. I can use something like a 20% shade cloth in those areas so that the plants are acclimated for this area, which is definitely not going to be as big of an issue as, say, buying it at a box store or something like that, simply because I'm propagating plants that I already grow here, and I'm propagating them here, and I'm going to grow them out here. See, one of the problems that we have here, and I'm sure it's pretty much everywhere, is you can go to the store and you buy a plant. Well, that plant shipped from somewhere else, often long distances, and it's not acclimated to your climate. Now, a good nursery will go ahead and set them up so that they become more acclimated to your area instead of just slamming them on the floor. But as we all know, it's a business about numbers and money. So a lot of times, as soon as they come in, out they go, right out on the floor. That's why places like Walmart and Home Depot have it set up to where they're not actually buying the plants. When you go buy a plant from them, you're not buying the plant from them. What it is they have it on consignment. Nurseries bring it in, they put it on consignment there, and if it dies, the nursery eats that. Because of this, if a plant dies, it doesn't matter to them people. It does not matter to the corporation. It does not matter to the people that they have working in the department 90% of the time. When you're dealing with a smaller local nursery, especially one that produces their stock themselves, well, if I lose a plant, then I lost the plant. I'm the one who eats that. Which means I'm going to take care of them better. Which means I'm going to make sure that they get exactly what they need, so that when you get a plant, you get what you need. I don't know how many people I've heard complain that they bought a plant. They paid $40 for this plant. Plant's only actually worth maybe 10 or 15 bucks. But they bought it at the box store. It was 40 bucks. It was dead in 2 weeks. Well, 90% of the time, that's not the end client's fault. That's usually because these plants were shipped in from out of area. Very, very large operations where they're producing hundreds of thousands of plants at a time. They never got acclimated for your area. Never, not once. They came in on a truck. They went from the truck straight out on the showroom floor. You came by, you bought it, you took it home, and well, then your specific environment killed it because it never acclimated. And most people don't even know how to acclimate a plant. They come home, tag says full sun, they go out in their yard, they dig a hole, put it in the yard, 2 weeks later it's dead. So I'm trying to keep that type of stuff from being a major issue, because it has been a major issue. The idea is that you're going to get something that I know has naturalized here. I know is fully adapted here. It was produced here by my hands, and it is fully acclimated, so that when you go home and you plant it, you have a much higher chance of success. Now, that being said, there will be some things that I'll have to tell people. Now, here, if you Google or you look online and everything, they're going to tell you that fruit trees, you should plant them either in the spring or the fall, and a lot of people prefer it in the fall. In Central Florida, the spring and the fall are the worst 2 times to be planting fruit trees. The spring is super dry. The fall, the whole idea is you put them in the fall, and then they're going to sleep, and then they'll wake up in their new home and they'll be happy. Well, no, this is Florida. Most things aren't going to be dormant. And if you then plant them in the fall, and if they are dormant and they start waking up in the spring, they're going to wake up during the driest time of the year, and they're going to die. So being able to tell my clients, hey, this is when you plant that. This is how you plant that. That is for my area. Is going to make all the difference as to whether or not they succeed. And you're not really going to get that from these big box stores. Another thing I'll be able to do is I'll be able to produce vegetable plants for when they are needed. Like in the next couple of days, I'm going to start planting. Man, that mosquito is annoying me. The next couple of days, I'm going to be starting my starts for this fall, my vegetable starts. Because I'm about 6 weeks out as to when they need to go in the ground, which means I need to start the succession of them now. So that come this fall, when my clients want their tomatoes, their peppers, their cucumbers, and it depends on what they are as to when I start them, I'll have those ready. So things like tomatoes, I need a month in advance before they're going to be ready for the client. Peppers, about a month. Eggplant, 6 weeks. Cucumbers, about 2 weeks. So the idea is to have them ready for my clients when it's the appropriate time. See, the appropriate time here in Central Florida is a bit different than it is for a lot of people in the country. Florida's backwards. What you think you know when it comes to planting vegetables, you got to flip it. We grow most of that stuff in the winter. Now, there are exceptions that will grow through our summer. And unfortunately, a lot of those aren't something that I'm going to be able to have available for them at the beginning of summer, because okra, which does really well here, does not like to be transplanted. Okra is best planted by seed exactly where you want it. But I will be able to do things like sweet potato. Sweet potato does really well in the summer, so I can have trays of sweet potatoes ready for transplant late spring. They don't do well during the winter here. They like the heat. So as our tomatoes are coming out, then we can put in sweet potatoes. And that's kind of how the succession works. And that's where I'm going with this, is I want to have everything ready at the appropriate time for people, which is going to be somewhat difficult for some people that are going to be coming in, and it happens every year. I always have people telling me about how they're planting their tomatoes in late April, early May, sometimes June. It's the wrong time of year. It's too late. And that's because they're used to doing it wherever it is they happen to be from. And normally when I hear somebody saying that, they're usually from New Jersey or Connecticut or somewhere up in the Northeast, somewhere up north. At that particular time, when they're wanting to plant that, and they're gung-ho, they're gonna grow their garden. They're gonna have a good garden this year. And they go out and they buy massive amounts of stuff. And then they go home and they plant it all and they do all this work. Everything dies. And it's because they got it at the wrong time, because these stores around here will sell you anything at any time, because to them it's about making money. For me, it's going to be about you being able to succeed. I want to get more food on the landscape, whether it's fruit trees or vegetables or something. I don't care if you're growing it in a pot, in the ground, hydroponically. We need to have more stable food production instead of relying on these giant corporations. Jonathan, a job might be way easier, but that's not what I'm doing this for. I have a job. I have my own companies. This is about people being able to produce food and not be reliant. Not be reliant on giant corporations, not be reliant on grocery stores. And for those people that live in food deserts, to be able to walk in their backyard and be like, oh, look, a mango. Because that's what grows well here. That's what this is about. It's about breaking our dependence on giant corporations that control everything, having fresh food. Hi, Slaves Garden. available regardless. Another thing I actually want to encourage people is what's called a public fruit tree. See, if there are trees planted in public parks, then the general public can go pick them. The guy that lives down the road that walks by there every day out to the bus stop to ride to work, pick a piece of fruit, take it to work with him. The homeless guy that hasn't eaten in 3 days walks by and there's ripe mangoes or peaches, he can pick a piece of fruit. So if you can help with things like that, it makes a big difference across the board. It's not necessarily the best option for dealing with that, but it's definitely better than what we got. Now, I'm going to flip the camera around. Second here. So, see if I can set back into the appropriate area. This is now my licensed nursery. It's small, but it's a start. And I'll expand from here. And I've still got room to expand in here. If I kind of make a couple modifications, I can probably get 3, maybe 4 more tables in here. But as things get larger, they'll come out of here and they'll end up going into a more appropriate area. So across here, I have mulberries. I got some peppers down there, Cuban oregano, more mulberries, because the mulberries are easy. I do have some decoratives. This here is night blooming jasmine. The point of the night blooming jasmine is more or less a permacultural point. It brings in pollinators, especially nighttime pollinators. And then I have other things that are more or less for fun for me, such as the Easter and Christmas cactus. So, a lot of these are doing pretty well. More Cuban oregano, pineapples. Pineapples are pretty much a standard here in Florida. You need 1 pineapple plant to get established to start a colony. And of course, I'm expanding. So this is the trays that I'm trying to fill right now. This tray is a different species of mulberry. That's a Persian red mulberry. The other one is a native red American mulberry. And then this here is a native firebush, once again for pollinators. Brings in hummingbirds, things like that. And I've got some elderberry going over there. I'm going to fill this tray completely with elderberry here in probably the next day or 2, so that they have enough time. Down here, that's a star fruit tree. This is for my garden, and I just up potted it just about a week ago. And this is an interesting one. This is a canistel. That canistel, that's a really cool plant. That's another plant that would make a good public fruit tree. The thing is, most people wouldn't recognize it, which is kind of a bit of a problem. It is. They'd walk right past it and not realize it's food. So that's something that people are going to have to be taught. They're going to have to be taught that here in Florida, a lot of things that we grow here is different than what they would expect. People from Central America, the Caribbean, and other semi-tropical and tropical areas will recognize those fruit and most likely be quite happy. But most Americans would not recognize that canistel. They'd see this fruit with a weird little yellow fruit on it, and they just keep on going. But there's a lot of things that you can plant that make a difference. Now, here is an avocado tree. Avocados grow exceedingly well in Florida. Central Florida and South Florida, they're basically a no hassle. I mean, no hassle to put these in. And most people would recognize them. And they happen to, most of them happen to produce the fruit during the winter. So when we have the largest influx of people coming down here into Florida, and we need that food more, because I'm not sure if anybody's aware of this, but there's a migration route with the homeless. A lot of them will hitchhike down to Florida to get away from the cold weather. And then they get down here. We have huge homeless camps. Huge. They're everywhere, especially during the winter. And it's a problem. A lot of that problem is the fact that these people are hungry. And even if it's something as small as them maybe finding a banana, because that'll produce a lot of food, they can carry it right on in. Now, something I did, oh God, that's 20 years ago or more. At least 20 years ago. There was a homeless camp back behind a Walgreens. That homeless camp is still there. It's been there for more than 20 years. I went into that patch of woods and I planted fruit trees. When I talked with the homeless people there, I told them what I was doing. Those fruit trees are now a large part of the nutrition for that homeless camp. Sometimes it's only 4 or 5 people in there. Sometimes there's over 100 people up in there. And every few years, the city of Melbourne runs up in there and runs everybody out. But there's all kinds of fruit trees that are growing in there now. Once I started, because I started with like 6 or 7 fruit trees, and I came back and I put in like another 4 or 5. I don't remember exactly. Some of the other homeless people started expanding it. So they're living in what is essentially a food forest. Other ones have come in and they, started learning, because I would talk to the people about how to build the soil and how to use what they already had, because they tend to keep a fire, especially during the winter, how to use that, and various things. So now they're growing vegetables. I went in there about 3 months ago just so I could go see how a particular tree was doing, because I wanted cuttings off of it. The mother plant that I originally created it from, I didn't manage to take with me when I moved. So I wandered in there and I got me a cutting of that tree in hopes that I can kind of return that tree back to my personal collection. And I'd say there's probably about 60 fruit trees of various different types out there now. And I saw vegetables. I saw Seminole pumpkins being grown. I saw sweet potatoes being grown. This makes a huge difference. And things like this is what we should be working on as a society. But hey, we can just keep doing it the way it's been done. It seems to be working real well for everybody. I mean, like, really well. Anyway, that aside, my nursery is completely licensed now. I'm not ready to be putting anything out for sale yet. I need to grow things out, and I need to produce more. And I had some questions about a couple of particular plants that I really want to produce, but it's kind of a gray area on the legality of producing them. Not as in, oh my God, I'm breaking a major law and like the DEA is going to come out and get me. Nothing like that. Ones that have been put on the invasive species list. But for one reason or another, they might not actually qualify for that. I'll give you a good example is Tithonia. Tithonia is basically a permaculture plant. It's very popular with the permaculturalists for the simple reason that it is a nitrogen fixer. You use it as a chop and drop. Beautiful flowers. It does a really good job. It makes hedges, things like that. Well, like everything in Florida, anything that grows too well goes on the invasive species list. Well, they recently put it on the invasive species list. However, the version of it I happen to have is sterile. It's a triploid hybrid, and it does not produce seeds. So I had to ask the state today, does this plant qualify as being on the invasive? Because it is a triploid hybrid that does not produce seeds. So I'm waiting for the answer on that. Another one that I had to ask, see, Florida has native cotton. It is native to southern Florida. It is not the same as industrial cotton. However, it does share fungal, because it is related, it does share fungal relations and the boll weevil. Anybody who's ever grown any cotton should be familiar with the cotton weevil and how much of a pain those things are. Now, here in Florida, the law is, unless you're a big farm, which nobody that I'm aware of actually does this anymore. It was laws put on the books 110 years ago. You can't grow cotton. And you can't grow the Florida cotton because it might endanger the industrial cotton that they were trying to establish in North Florida. So you can't grow a native Florida plant. You're not allowed to plant it. However, native Florida cotton is now on the Florida endangered species list, which means if it pops up in your yard, you're not allowed to kill it. So you're not allowed to plant it. You're not allowed to kill it. There is a lot of push for us to grow native plants here in Florida because of all the massive invasive problems that we have. And the Florida cotton produces beautiful hibiscus flowers because it's in the hibiscus family. It grows easily in South Florida, Central Florida, and all the way up to the Panhandle. Easy. But we're not allowed to grow it because of an industry that is actually not present here in Florida. They paved the way for them, and then it never happened. Laws are still on the books. Since they're always saying, grow natives, grow natives, grow natives. And there's a big push by the state of Florida to grow natives. So I had to ask, am I allowed to grow these and sell them? Because they're a native and they're endangered. And the more of them I get out there, the better off it will be because they're on the endangered species list. Well, as it stands right now, the answer is no. Don't even touch it. But they'll get back to me because he's going to go talk to people that are much further up on the chain. And I've kind of poked a bear on that one. Hey, we don't actually have an industrial cotton industry in Florida. These laws were written over 100 years ago so that we would get one, and we barely even had one. And only up in the Panhandle. There might be a farm or two that's still up there, maybe along the Alabama border, but I don't think there's any left. And I can't find any I can't find any registered. I can't find any online. So why are we doing this now? Anyway, just a little food for thought. I wanted to go on here and talk about the fact that I'm now a registered nursery and that I will be doing plant sales this fall. It will be 2 locals this first year. I'm going to have to build it up. Maybe next year I'll be able to take it to the next step and be able to do shipping. However, being the way the plant laws are, I will not be shipping to California. I'm not jumping through their flaming hoops. I'm not doing it. From what I understand, New Mexico is quite the pain too, so that might not be on the list. So I've got to do a little research. I'm having the Florida Department of Agriculture send me the appropriate stuff so that I can look over and determine what states will be viable. International shipping isn't going to happen. Maybe one day I'll be big enough for that, but honestly, if I ever got that type of big, I'd most likely spend the time and money establishing food systems at churches, schools, and anybody at all that is poor. I'll go right in their backyard and plant them some fruit trees, because I'd rather spend my time doing that than shipping to an elite group somewhere else. Y'all have a good day. I'm going to cut it here. Happy gardening.